have you here joining us. But, you know, obviously this was not a surprise that Scott Arniel will be the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets, but we saw there they interviewed a number of top candidates. What can you tell us about what ultimately made the decision to bring Arniel in?
Catherine, I believe he was always the favorite. Like somebody was going to have to beat him, and I obviously nobody did. They did interview a lot of people. It was pretty extensive. I understand. Like for example, Dean Evason, I think was one of the people they interviewed. I think they interviewed Berube, although obviously he's in Toronto. I think they talked to Todd McClellan, who has spoken to a bunch of teams, and obviously I think there were plenty more. But right from the beginning, Arniel was the man to beat. Like someone was going to have to really beat him to get that job, and I don't think anyone is overly surprised that it didn't happen. You know, the thing that happened last year was there were a couple times where he had to coach because the Bowness family had some challenges health-wise, and he did a pretty good job there. And sometimes I think one of the toughest things to do in hockey is go from assistant coach to head coach, because sometimes you have to switch from good cop to bad cop, and the players can see through it or don't necessarily like it. But I thought he handled it really well, and I don't think anybody's surprised. It was always his job to lose.
So that leaves now two vacant coaching positions in the NHL. You've got the Seattle Kraken and the San Jose Sharks. What can you tell us? You mentioned a couple names just now about who was a candidate, if you will, for the Winnipeg Jets. But what do you think about these two vacancies and who we might see in behind the bench next season?
All right, Catherine, you're the host and I'm the guest. Who do you want first?
Give me Seattle.
Okay. Seattle first. The three names I've really been focused in on Seattle are Dan Bylsma, who's the coach of their American Hockey League team in Coachella Valley. Jay Leach, who was already an assistant coach there. I believe he's interviewed a couple of times. Todd McClellan, I think, is someone that they've looked at. They've interviewed him, and I believe they've also interviewed Dean Evason. I'm sure there's been more, but those are the names I've really been counting on. I think there are people in the organization who support Bylsma, and I think there are people in the organization who support some of the other candidates. I'm curious to see. I think there's been, I don't know if disagreement is the right word, but certainly debate on which way to go here. But I do think that Bylsma has been, because he's internal as the AHL coach, I think he's got some traction there. But like I said, there's four names. Going to San Jose, I think among the names that people have talked about there, Jeff Blashill, the current assistant coach in Tampa Bay, who is what used to be the head coach in Detroit. I think they've looked at him. Marco Sturm, they have permission to interview. He's the coach of Ontario, which is Los Angeles' team in the American Hockey League. Ryan Warsofsky, who was an assistant coach in San Jose last year, an up-and-coming young coach, I think, is on their list. And I always believe I'm missing people or haven't found people. There's been some belief, unconfirmed, that Jeremy Culleton, who was replaced today as Abbotsford's head coach in the American Hockey League, may have interviewed in San Jose. I always think there are more, but those are some of the names I've heard that have talked to the Sharks.
Now, kind of shifting gears to the GM side of things with Don Waddell in Carolina. What are you hearing from there? Like, how did that come to be? Was it differences between the ownership and him, or just having signed Rod Brind'Amour? Kind of, what are you hearing coming out of Carolina right now?
Well, Jason, I think that it was time. I think in these in situations, sometimes it comes to a point where it's just time, and I think that it happened in Carolina. Don Waddell had been there for a bit. He'd done a really good job there, and I just think it got to a point where one of the things as this broke over the last 24 hours, Jason, was there have been a couple of previous occasions where Don Waddell his contract was up, or maybe people thought he would leave or he would interview somewhere else. Like, for example, when Bill Guerin was hired as GM of the Wild, Don Waddell was one of the finalists there. But there was always a kind of feeling that things would work out with him in Carolina and he would stay. This was very different. It became kind of apparent over the last week that I don't know if it was a split or just everybody had just realized it was time. But I think they knew that this was going to be different, and there started to be feelers that Carolina was going to look for a new general manager. So Waddell interviewed in Columbus yesterday. I don't think anybody will be surprised if he ends up in the Columbus organization in some role. I don't know exactly what that is going to be right now, and I do think other teams have shown some interest in talking to him. But I know a lot of eyes are on Columbus right now, is that there is a fit for him there. We'll see how it plays out. In Columbus, as they said today, that Eric Tulsky is the interim GM. He's a big figure there behind the scenes. I also thought it was really interesting that they mentioned Darren York in their media release today, because he's another young executive that they think very highly of. There's an AGM there, Aaron Schwartz, who's been there as a key part of their front office for quite a while. So they have some internal candidates there, all of whom have had a big voice in their hockey operations. There's been some talk that they will go outside. I think it's pretty interesting in the sense that those three individuals have had pretty big say in the Carolina organization already. And I've heard from some people already just on the outside who are saying, hey, like, you know, if people like Tulsky and York and Schwartz have already had big impact in there, why are they not promoting? And are you going into, if you're new, are you going into a front office where there's already a quote unquote team in place? So I'm curious to see where the Hurricanes go here. They seem determined to do a search and do an interview outside candidates. But I'm very interested to see if they go with that or they promote one of the people from within.
Elliot, I'm sure you've been asked this a lot already the last few days, but being the resident Devil guy, I'm going to ask you about Adam Keefe and what you think about the Devils' hire as Sheldon Keefe, Adam Keefe, Sheldon Keefe.
That name's
Devils
better
head
for him,
coach.
though.
We might have to rename him when he goes to New Jersey.
Where'd that come up with Adam? I don't even.
You know, Adam Keefe. There is an Adam Keefe. Like so you're not way off there at all, Ken. I really like Sheldon. I think he was a great hire for the Devils, and I think he will do very well there. And it's my belief, and Brad Treliving kind of echoed this at the media conference where Craig Berube was hired, is that Sheldon Keefe wasn't fired by the Toronto Maple Leafs because he's a bad coach. Sheldon Keefe was fired by the Toronto Maple Leafs because they couldn't run it back. They had tried the same thing for a few years, and it just didn't get to where they wanted to go. And it got to a situation where they couldn't sell this particular group to continue together. And sometimes the coach is the easiest thing to do. I think he's a really good head coach. I thought he did a good job there last year. You know, they used 13 defensemen and 4 goalies. They had a lot of excuses to go sideways, and he did a really nice job. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, Jeremy Swayman was the MVP of that first round of the series for Boston, and he was the biggest reason they won. And that's the way it goes sometimes. And, you know, I think that he's used to top young talent. I think doesn't get credit for how demanding he can be, although he prefers to do it behind the scenes as opposed to publicly. And Ken, I know you're the big Devils guy, and I'll say this. I think a lot of coaches who had a chance for jobs viewed the Devils as the number one job available. Now they got to find some more defense and they got to find some goaltending, but that's a good young team with an owner that's willing to spend. And I think that a lot of those coaches really like that Devils job. And I think it's a good fit for him and the Devils.
It's a great place to live, too, by the way, just saying.
It's not bad, yeah.
From a true Jersey girl.
We all live in the
a
area,
close,
but-
yeah.
I apologize, Sheldon. I don't know where. You know, we go off the cusp every once in a while, lose our marbles.
We do.
Adam.
Elliot, a little bit of late news as well. Not necessarily news, but some rumblings that the Canucks have interest maybe in Marty Necas. I know we were just chatting about Carolina. What are you hearing about this? Because there's a lot of restricted and unrestricted free agents right now for Carolina. Necas certainly in that RFA category. Is this a possibility that Vancouver gets him?
It better be, Catherine, because I was one of the people who reported it, and I don't feel like making stuff up yet today. You know, yes, I do think the Canucks are one of the teams that are interested. You know, Necas and the Hurricanes are at a bit of a crossroads salary-wise. His contract is up. I don't think there's any question about the skill and the ability of the player. I think the Hurricanes think he's a talented guy, and he definitely is a talented guy. But I do think the two of them have a disagreement on what his worth is contract-wise. They have not been able to do it, and I think that is why you could see the possibility that he is traded.
But does
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
we can ask that? Does Tulsky?
Do you think the Canucks have interest?
Does Tulsky have authority to trade somebody right now?
Well, I would look at it this way, Jason. Even though Don Waddell was the general manager and had big say there, so did Tulsky. He made a lot of decisions behind the scenes there, or at least was a very valuable person in the decision-making process. So I don't think, like, to me, might they wait? They might, but it's not like, Tulsky didn't play a huge role behind the scenes in making a lot of the choices they already made. So I do not believe that this will preclude Carolina from making deals if they see something they like. Also, don't forget, we're a month away from the draft. You have to be prepared to do things. And as we've seen, trade season has already started. So you have to be prepared to do things. I don't think they'll be afraid. And I think there's more teams than the Canucks, but the Canucks are definitely interested. And I think the other thing too is the Hurricanes have to do business. That's a big list of
Huge.
from Gensel to Pesce to Brady Shea. You can't sit around and wait. You've got to do work.
Who, just to stay with defensemen, because you got two sitting here, who do you think are their top guys on Carolina that they're trying to get locked up, and which ones are they kind of willing to part with? Like anything you've heard rumbling wise?
Well, I'll tell you this, Jason. I think that the guy they actually want to make sure they take care of the most is not on that list, and that is Jacob Slavin, who has one more year left in his current contract. That is one thing that I've been told, is that they want to make sure that he is locked up, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are trying to lock down an extension for July 1st, which is the first day that he can be signed. I think they consider him a huge part of their team. And I think that he is someone they will try to extend the moment they can do it. With Pesce and Slavin, with Pesce and Shea, I think they've been trying to lock those guys up for some time now, and they just have not been able to make a deal. I think they took a big run at Pesce last summer in the 5x5 range. That doesn't seem to do it. I know they made a couple of different offers to Shea, one short term and one long term, for example. Couldn't do it. I know they've been talking to Chatfield for a little bit on and off. I think I wouldn't be surprised if the guy they try to lock up first, or the guy that maybe they get done first, at least in terms of being able to announce it, is Slavin, because I think they consider him their best defenseman.
And Elliot, just curious here, with Tulsky being the interim GM, how much of a say does Rod Brind'Amour have in these conversations of who he'd like to bring back?
I think Brind'Amour has a big voice. I do. I think he has. They listen to him. They know how. Like, there's not a coach in the NHL that has a bigger impact on his team's culture than Brind'Amour does, and they knew it, and that's why they made sure and got him signed. I think he has a very big say in what they want to do. I mean, I got to tell you, like, anybody who chews gum like that, he means business. So you got to listen to what he has to say.
You got that right. Elliot, thanks as always for your insight. Great reporting on the news today, and we'll look forward to seeing you down the road.
All right, back to the hotel pool. See you guys later.